Her palms were still shaking when the stagecoach finally stopped. The wheels groaned, the horses snorted, and dust rolled through the air like smoke from an old fire. Evelyn Carver stepped down onto the hard earth, boots sinking slightly into the dry soil. She blinked against the glare of the western sun, her bonnet slipping loose as wind whipped her hair across her face. This was it, her new beginning. 2,000 miles from everything she'd ever known, standing in a town that looked more like a handful of buildings trying to survive the wind than a place to call home. She had come all this way to marry a man she'd never met, a man who had written her 3 short letters and signed them simply, Silas Reed. Her hand trembled around her travel bag. The station master gave her a quick nod and turned away, already calling for the next passenger. She looked around. No one came forward. The heat shimmered over the dirt road until the air itself seemed to bend. Then she saw him. A tall figure stepped out from the shade of a post, hat low, shoulders broad, and movement slow as if nothing in this world could hurry him. His shirt was worn thin from sun and work, his face tanned deep, his eyes unreadable. "Mrs. Carver?" he asked, voice low and rough around the edges. She swallowed hard. "It's Evelyn," she managed. He nodded once. "Silas Reed." For a long breath, neither moved. The sound of the wind filled the space between them. Then, with a quiet steadiness that caught her off guard, he stepped closer and held out his hand. "You huttin'?" "You fell when that coach stopped too fast." Evelyn glanced down. Her knee was scraped, blood drying along the torn hem of her dress. "It's nothing," she said quickly, trying to stand a little taller. He studied her, eyes narrowing slightly, not out of anger but concern. "Ain't nothing when it's yours to feel," he murmured, then offered his hand again. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. His hand was rough, strong, and warm. He pulled her up easily, as if she weighed no more than a thought. For a second, she found herself too close to him. Her heart stuttered against her ribs. She looked at the wagon waiting behind him. Small, battered, built for hauling lumber, not people. "That thing's too small," she whispered before she could stop herself. "Will it even fit us both?" Silas froze, just long enough for the sunlight to catch his face. Then, slow and quiet, he said, "They'll fit just fine, ma'am." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. The ride out to the ranch stretched long across the open land. The world seemed endless. Golden grass bending low under the sun, rocks scattered like bones, the sky wide enough to make a person feel small. Evelyn sat straight, careful not to touch his arm as the wagon bumped along. Silas didn't speak much. When he did, it was simple things. Weather, the horses, where the river ran dry last spring. His voice was deep, carrying a kind of weariness that didn't need explaining. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun had started to dip, painting the land in amber and dust. The house stood alone, 2 stories of old wood in silence. A windmill creaked slow in the distance, its shadow long and tired. Silas climbed down first, then reached up a hand for her again. She wanted to refuse, to prove she could manage, but her knees still throbbed. He helped her down gently, steady as stone. "You're bleeding through that cloth," he said. "It's fine," she muttered, but her voice shook. He crouched, untied a small water pouch from his belt, and poured it carefully over her knee. The cool sting made her flinch. He tore a strip of clean fabric from his shirt and wrapped it around her leg, his hand surprisingly gentle. "You didn't have to," she started. He looked up, eyes catching hers. "You're my wife now," he said simply. "Ain't no half measures in that." Her heart stumbled again. No one had ever said something that sounded both like a promise and a warning at once. That night, the house felt too big and too quiet. She sat by the small fire, watching Silas on the porch. He sat still, pipe unlit, staring out at the horizon like it might answer questions he couldn't ask out loud. Finally, she spoke. "You ever get lonely out here?" He didn't turn. "Lonely's different from alone," he said. "Out here, I can breathe without anyone watching me do it." She thought about that a long while. The next few days fell into rhythm. Silas worked the fences and horses, rising before dawn, coming in long after sunset. Evelyn tried to cook, clean, make herself useful. The first loaf of bread burned. The second didn't rise, but he never said a word against it. He just smiled faintly and poured her more coffee. One afternoon, she rode into town alone. She told herself she only needed sugar, but the truth was she needed voices, a reminder she wasn't invisible. The general store was nearly empty. A few men loitered near the counter, hats tilted, boots muddy from a mine road. One of them, broad and red-faced, straightened when she entered. "Well now," he drawled, "you must be the new Mrs. Reed." Evelyn managed a polite nod. "Just here for a few things." The man stepped closer. Heard Silas sent east for a wife. Always figured he liked the quiet type. She tried to move past him, but his hand shot out, catching her wrist. The touch burned. "Let me go," she said. He grinned, leaning in. "Don't get all riled, darling. Just talking." The door swung open behind her. The room fell silent. Silas stood in the doorway, coat dusty, eyes sharp as iron. "You best move that hand, Ray," he said. Ray hesitated, smirk fading. "We're just having fun." "Now." The word was quiet, but it hit like a bullet. Ray's hand dropped. Silas didn't blink. "Touch her again, and I'll plant you so deep this land will forget your name." No one doubted he meant it. He took Evelyn's arm, not roughly, just firmly, guiding her outside. The sunlight hit like fire, but it felt cleaner than the air inside. "On the way back," she tried to speak. "You didn't have to do that." His jaw tightened. "Yeah, I did." They rode in silence. The only sound was a creak of the wagon wheels and the faint thump of hooves in dry dirt. Later that night, she found him fixing a fence post near the barn, hammer striking in slow rhythm. "Silas," she said quietly. "Thank you." He paused mid-swing, then nodded once without looking up. "Ain't no thanks needed for keeping what's mine safe." Days passed. The gossip in town grew. She heard whispers when she went for supplies. Talk that Silas had once killed a man in Texas, that he'd done it without warning, over land or a woman, or both. That evening, she found him sitting at the table, dust still clinging to his shoulders. "Is it true," she asked softly, "what they're saying?" He didn't answer right away. Then in a low voice he said, "I did what I had to. Man came for me, didn't miss his chance. But I didn't shoot no one who didn't earn it." Evelyn searched his face. "Why won't you tell folks that?" He looked at her then, eyes tired but steady. "Out here, words don't clean blood. Time does." That night, she couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the shutters. She thought of all the miles she'd run from her own past, and how this man, quiet and haunted, somehow made her feel safer than she'd ever been. The next morning, she rode beside him into town. The streets went quiet when they arrived. Someone muttered, "Murderer." Evelyn stopped walking. Her heart pounded, but she didn't look away. "You're wrong," she said, voice clear. "Silas Reed's the kindest man I've ever met. Maybe ask yourselves who made him fight to stay alive." The silence that followed felt heavy but clean. When she turned, Silas was watching her, that same unreadable face. Only now there was something softer behind it. On the ride home, he finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that." She smiled faintly. "Seems to be a habit around here." For the first time, he laughed, quiet and low, like the sound of rain on dry soil. That evening, they sat outside as the sun fell behind the hills. The world glowed gold and still. Evelyn looked at the small house, the worn fences, the land stretching endless. "You built all this," she said, "for yourself." He nodded. "And then you built a place for me, too." Silas turned toward her, a slow grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Guess it fits after all." She smiled, told you it was too small. He looked out at the horizon, voice quiet. "Sometimes small's just right, long as there's someone worth sharing it with." The light faded. Crickets began to sing, and the wind carried the smell of dust and cedar through the air. Sometimes the West doesn't give you what you dream of. It gives you what you can hold on to. A place, a person, a promise made quiet between two people who stopped running long enough to find each other. So tell me, have you ever met someone who made you feel like you finally fit? Or are you still waiting for that kind of love? If this story found you tonight, maybe give a like. Helps other folks find their way through the dust too. And if you want to keep riding with us through the wild stories of the Old West, subscribe and pour yourself another cup of coffee, because some stories ain't about the past. They're about learning to stay when the world keeps moving.